so we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third task force session to discuss the work that remains to be done before the 24th, especially given that the board retreat is happening starting tomorrow all the way through Saturday. It kind of limits the cabinet in terms of how much they can do on those days. So I'm pretty sure that they've been working diligently to complete the proposal by today or at some point towards the end of today, just to make sure that things are done and submitted on time for Friday. So today we're going to have an opportunity to kind of hear from the different subcommittee leaders, and they're going to highlight where they are in the work. In order to provide equity of voice, I'm going to remind the leaders to maintain the 3-minute time frame. Frank, who's going to be keeping time for us?
I'm going to nominate Doug Marchetti for that role.
Doug, are you with us?
I am right here. Thank you, Dr. Costanzo. I have my stopwatch right here. Yes.
Oh, you see, you're going to use those skills.
You picked the right. I can't do much, but I can hit a stopwatch. There we go.
So you can help us with that, because I just want to make sure that we have equity of voice. I know last time different groups lasted a little bit longer than others, and it limited our ability to have all members of the task force engage in conversation. So I think it's really important, especially because we're kind of wrapping things up, to give people an opportunity to share. The other piece that I want to highlight is that although we're submitting this proposal on Friday, there is an expectation that we're going to be continuing in this work. So I'm going to be sending the calendar invites for us to continue to meet on Wednesday. I think that we've made great progress in answering the questions that we need to answer for the state as of Friday's expectations, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done around the orange as well as the red criteria that we need to finish fleshing out. I know we have an overview of what that program and what the safety precautions will be as a result of going into orange or red, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done in order to build the finite details around that. And one of the things that I'm hoping to focus on next week is around stress testing and looking at even our yellow structure and really engaging in some stress tests to ensure that we have looked at any potential what if factor that we need to take into consideration as we continue to build our model. And it's possible that as we enter the school year and we start the work, that we will learn many other things that we will have to come back, reconvene, and assess and readapt. So it's going to be important that we continue engaging in these conversations and amongst the subcommittee, even after August and potentially part of September, so that we can revisit our plan and have opportunities to have conversations around what we're learning as we're moving through the work, and if we need to make adjustments to make sure that we continue to maintain the safety and well-being of our children. Because I think that is going to be really important, especially because, as you know, the community is unsettled by everything that has happened with COVID-19, and we need to regain their trust in feeling that they are comfortable in sending their children to school again. So it's going to be really important that we're constantly revisiting protocol and structure so that we continue to refine the work and make sure that our community feels comfortable with giving us their most valuable asset, which is our children, right? So with that, I'm going to now turn it back to Ms. Pilardo. I'm sorry, messing people's names up again. But she's going to speak a little bit about the survey. I think it's really important for us to get an update around that and get a sense of where we are, because that's also going to inform our model and how we move forward. So I'm turning it to you now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we had a survey that opened last Friday, the 17th, a return to school survey. And we surveyed our families and our teachers. It was an anonymous survey. And it was remarkable in terms of participation rate. We had 47% of our families participate and 82% of our staff. If you remember in May, we also had a distance learning survey. And for that survey, it was 10 days long, and our participation rate was 40% for families and about 75% for staff. So in a very short amount of time, we've got excellent participation. Below the participation rates and the counts of families and teachers, you see the topics that were covered in the survey. In each survey, there were 20 questions. And we are going to focus on a few of those questions, but to give you an idea, 11% of families that responded identified their children as Black, 31% as Hispanic, 38% as white, and 12% identified their children as 2 or more races. So that just gives you a sense of our respondents. Now you're looking at one of the topics, preparing for the return to school. And one of the questions on that topic is, assuming appropriate safety measures are in place, what is your preference for returning in the fall? So we can see that for both, if you look at for both in-person learning, a third of the families, that was their preference. A mix of in-person and distance learning, about a third, and all distance learning. If you look at staff and teachers, for all in-person learning, almost 20%. For a mix, about 46%, and all distance, 35%. Now, when you look at the survey, you also consider who responded. Of those 4,868 families, 48% of those families said that they had students in elementary school, 21% in middle school, and 30% in high school. Of the staff and teachers that responded, 74% were certified staff and 26% non-certified staff. Another question that we asked, and of course we did ask this back in May for the distance survey, is what best describes your typical internet access? And this is very good news as far as families saying the access that their students had at home. 97% said students had reliable internet access, but of those, only 70% said that they had high-speed internet, but nonetheless, 97% accurate. For staff, that was 98% accurate. Now, going back to May, the response for families were 93%, and for staff, 75% at that time. So their staff and teachers have responded more favorable to having reliable access. Finally, under instructional preferences, preference for more frequent in-person learning for younger grade student levels over older grade levels. And you can see 27% of families were favorable for that. They were quite preferred that, or extremely preferred it. compared to 32% for our teachers and staff. And 55% of our families said they did not prefer it, or they slightly preferred it, in comparison to 44% for our staff. Now, this is just a glimpse of a few questions that were answered by this survey. Certainly, we can look at results in a variety of ways, including school results. One of the first questions that a family or a teacher and staff member was asked before the survey began was, what school does your child attend? What school do you work in? So this is just scratching the surface, but it gives you a sense of where we are. And as I said, the survey did close yesterday. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Diane, thank you very much for presenting those survey results. The timing was ideal, as this report to the State Department of Education is due at the end of this week. We wanted to spend the next portion of today's meeting taking the task force through the report as it stands now in draft form. Although I'll say Brenda Williams and her team have done an outstanding job at taking all of the content from the various subcommittees and pouring it into this really polished document. So I'll ask that Brenda Williams share her screen and make visible for the task force the report as it stands now, but fairly close to being ready for submission. We're going to do this in an order that reflects the sequence of the report itself. So I'll begin by providing some context for the executive summary, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Myers, who will discuss in greater detail the education plan. So you can see in the report we have prepared a initial graphic which the state requires, just explaining the superintendent, her contact information, and the local LEA COVID-19 health and safety expert. There's a table of contents that is still in development, but reflects the various categories that this task force has been organized into. And here you'll see the introduction, which basically includes the task force charge, which for us, what we have talked about is preparing for 3 education models depending upon the level of COVID-19 spread, minimal, moderate, or a high level COVID-19 spread, and planning to return either in full in-person learning, pre-K through 12, if infection rates remain or continue to drop from current numbers, a hybrid in-person remote learning model, in which case we would see a student density number reduced to 50% of the current total district population, which is about 12,000, or a full remote learning model, which we're all familiar with, having gone through the March, April, May, and June time period. This task force was most focused on the health and the well-being of students and staff. That was the priority, the underpinning of everything that we attempted to develop and design for the 2020-2021 school year. Secondarily, student academic growth and social emotional learning was a key in this report. And so we're hopeful that these various categories that we'll delve into in more depth will speak to that priority. And then emphasizing equity and access. And this is something that the superintendent and the Board of Education will talk more about in the days and the weeks ahead, as the district moves toward a more equity centric point of view with respect to the various educational programs across the city. So we also kept that in mind when we think about technology access, resources, supplies, and quality of program. And then lastly, we also prioritized the operational and financial stability for the Board of Education. You might remember that last week, one of our key areas or focuses was the financial reporting, and Tom Hamilton will speak to that a bit later. So I want to now turn it over to Dr. Myers. I hope that this provided you with a general overview of the report, and we'll now hear in more detail about the education plan for the 2020-21 school year. Brenda?
Thank you, Dr. Costanza, and a special thank you to our committee. They have been engaging in some very deep thinking as they've planned for the instruction for 1,200 children and the return to school. When we started our planning, we began with starting with the end in mind. And so that promise that every student would have continuity through the 2021 school year, which would mean their reporting, their assessment, the data that we would gather on a student, the teacher that they would be assigned, and of course, ultimately, the courses for graduation and being able to issue transcripts showing credits earned towards the graduation requirements. So we needed to start with that frame and to make sure that all of our design would ensure that continuity for students, for families, and for teachers. We looked at our daily schedule, and what we have developed, and we have samples of for elementary, middle school, and high school, is that the day is a regular day. It's a school day, very similar to the time of start and the time of end. If you were an elementary building, we have some early start buildings and we have some late start buildings. Of course, we have our high schools that will be on the later start time schedule. So if we are all in school, we know what our start time is, we know what the length of our day, and we know that whether we are in a face-to-face or a remote situation or a virtual school, this becomes very important so that the student knows first period, who's my teacher, what's my topic, whether I'm walking into a school building or I'm going to be signing into my learning management system like a Google Classroom. So we've built that schedule so that we can move between risk levels and ensure that we can support all students in their learning. In addition to that, we've outlined our curricular components, making sure that we're following the curriculum that we have in place with our prioritized content and skills, our key routines, and how the digital literacy tools support those important thinking strategies that we have, and how we gather and give feedback on our evidence of learning. So in each, the elementary, the middle, and the high school, we've built in what that learning cycle and planning looks like, which would be in a remote environment as well as in a face-to-face environment. And the curriculum wouldn't change depending on the risk level. If a student was taking an AP course, that would be the curriculum. That curriculum would again be designed by unit, and the digital tools would help students to access that curriculum. So a blended environment is part of our daily practice. We were able to look then at how we did our daily schedule, our assessment and grading, our curricular expectations, our tools for technology integration, and we laid those out so that we could design what would be most appropriate at the elementary, the middle, and the high school. Thank you.
Ooh, Frank, you're on mute.
Just wanted to make sure you are all queued up. Ralph, are you ready?
Yeah, I am definitely. So thanks, Frank. And hello, committee members. I really wanted to thank as well the virtual subcommittee members and share quickly some of the core components of the virtual option for students. So Dr. Myers has already explained a little bit about the many elements of digital learning that go into play. But quickly, As a district, since the pandemic began, we've learned how important devices and access are for all students, and we're currently addressing this need to make sure that all students have the option to be in the virtual school model. So we are putting that in place on the technology side. Students that do opt into this model, as Dr. Myers was mentioning, it looking very similar from the yellow to orange to red. Students that opt into the virtual school will be instructed by our certified staff and teachers, and the school day will mirror as closely as possible to the in-person school day. So there may be slight modifications, but nothing that really would, within a few minutes of that, they will actually look exactly the same. Courses will be taught as they are in the traditional school. Expectations on how to teach and learn in a digital environment will be in place for teachers, students, and parents. And the standard will be the same for all students across the district. So an example would be that a student from Rowayton would receive the same experience online as a student from Kendall. So, and we would see that across the boards. Courses will all count for credit, and the course selection will be based on the capacity of the actual virtual school. That being said, there may be a few courses in the hundreds that we offer due to enrollment, staffing, or resources that may be something we have to really look into. So the example I can give is there's a potential that a culinary course could be difficult to do just because we may not have the resources to be able to for that course. But we will address these once we have the enrollment in place to make sure that we address those small little outliers. But as Dr. Myers mentioned, obviously the AP classes, everything else that we have put in place will be paralleled in the virtual environment as they are in our regular in-person environment. We will allow for, one of the questions that's come up is transitions, and we will allow for transitions into and out of the school. But we do know that we also need to review each case on a case-by-case level, and we want to make sure that we make this as seamless for everybody regarding their academics, which we know as if the models are mirroring each other should not be an issue at all. And we also want to ensure, one thing we want to take into account with this transition is the safety of our students and staff. So someone being at home, making sure that the precautions have been put into place for them to come back to school and vice versa. My last comment would be is if we do go into a complete shutdown or into the red, all teachers would teach using the same virtual model. So we're going to make sure with professional development, everything is aligned and all the digital learning professional development that goes on will be offered to all teachers in the district. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Ralph. And we should have Brenda Williams coming on next for parent and family engagement.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully everybody can see this. I've increased the size a little bit, so hopefully you can all read the document. If you can't, let me know. So we actually have communications and family engagement in two separate places in this document based on the template that the state put forward. So I'm going to cover the highlights of them both here right now. We start out with obviously the Chief of School Operations is our primary liaison. And then we talk about the communication systems that we have in place to identify how we will get out both routine communications about what's going on in terms of our reopening and our back to school, as well as any urgent messages should we need to pivot quickly if there's a change in the public health scenario and we need to perhaps go out with little notice. And so it covers really our standard communications vehicles, which are pretty extensive for the district, our school messenger, e-blast, robocalls, and text. Materials will always be on our school and district websites, our district social media accounts, outreach to traditional media as well. I think you're all familiar with our district and staff newsletters. We will have quite a bit of two-way communication outreach built into all of those. But also I just wanted to make you aware that we'll actually be starting next week after this report is delivered to the state on Saturday. Dr. Estrella will be hosting really a town hall style webinar. There'll be 3 versions of that, one for staff, one for families in English, and then another for families in Spanish. And those will be on Wednesday, July 29th. And I will get those out to everybody. We'll have a flyer going out shortly. It's in translation. It will be blasted out, and I will get it out to everybody on the task force. Please share it with your subcommittees as well, all of your members, so that they can also amplify the message. We want to have as many people as possible hear directly from the district about the contents of this report and what it is that we're presenting. So we talked a little bit, Diane talked about the data collection. We will also have, I think, a re-enrollment form is the best way to describe it. That will come out in early August after summer school has been completed. And the point of that will be to identify student-specific information about whether a student plans to return to in-person learning or to opt out for distance learning. And that will be identified on a per school basis, giving the schools the data and the information that they need in order to specifically plan for the fall. And then the subsequent section focuses a little bit more on some of the family engagement questions that the state is interested in hearing about. You know, our school governance councils, which continue to meet both online and in person if the public health situation allows it. It also talks a little bit more about the community networks that we're tapping into and that we tapped into in the spring in order to support families, the NAACP, some of the Hispanic organizations, the city services, whether it's Lamont's Community Services Group or housing, and you know, also our EL Welcome Center and all of that. And then last but not least, we will be planning a print version of a high-level overview for reopening that will be family-friendly. It will be highly visual, and that is something that as soon as this report is finalized, our committee will be focused on making sure that we're putting that together and getting their input so that we have that ready. Parents are going to have a lot of questions, and we want to make sure that we're covering them because a document like this is pretty in-depth. So that will be coming out, and our plan is, in addition to sort of the usual online ways that we get that out, that will also be a print piece, and whether it's mailed home with start of school materials from the school or from the district, we'll figure out the most efficient way to get that out so that we are reaching all families, even the ones that are not necessarily online as frequently as others. So,
thank you, Brenda. We'll ask Bill Hodel to speak to facilities now.
Thank you, Dr. Costanzo, and thank you all members. Facilities is going to play a key role in how each school will look. So currently we are looking at the classroom layout, which would maintain a social distancing of at least 6 feet where feasible. We have looking into repurposing larger public assembly spaces such as auditoriums, cafeterias, and we will use them when and if needed. We are also looking at some municipal space that is currently not being used as a possible extension of where we can utilize additional space for our needs. Protocols are in place, whereas the teacher would also maintain a 6-foot distance during the instruction in each classroom. All signs have been posted, and we are continuing with that process after summer school. They are bilingual and multicultural in most cases. They include hand washing, social distancing, not sharing of materials, and various other topics. Staff will be trained in use of the sanitization products. They're using them now, but a refresher course is always helpful, and we have plenty of stock on hand. We are using a highly effective sanitization product that is proven to kill COVID-19 as well as 27 other pathogens. So our goal here is the safety and security of all students, and we're planning in that direction. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. I'll ask Child Nutrition now to come on and provide their overview.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to thank our subcommittees and everyone involved in this. It's been amazing to watch, and everyone's doing such a wonderful job. So the Child Nutrition Program will continue to accept all meal applications, both online and in paper form. The applications will be processed and entered into the point of sale system at the district level. And then within 10 days of determinations of the application, a letter will be sent home to families to inform the parents and guardians of their child's eligibility. Once this determination of free, reduced, and paid has been made at the district level, the information will be transferred to serving lines at the school level within about a day's time. To ensure the safety of our students, the Child Nutrition Program is using a touchless system for students to swipe their personal barcodes. The meal will register as paid, free, reduced, depending on the determination of the child's application, which is also for claiming purposes. For students in virtual learning, meals will be served from one of 10 sites at the one of 10 tent sites. Parents can pick up the student meal and confirm the child's name with the food service staff member working at the tent. The staff member will then scan the barcode associated with that student, and the account will be charged according to the student's eligibility status for claiming purposes as well. Child Nutrition will continue to provide meals every day to all students for both virtual and in-person learning. Breakfast and lunch for students will meet all the necessary meal pattern guidelines, which are provided by the state. And Child Nutrition will continue to use the point of sale system for counting and claiming meals and to process the claims for reimbursement at the end of each month. This can happen within the yellow, orange, or the red levels of meals. Thank you. That's pretty much it for food service.
Thank you, Jill. We'll next turn to transportation and ask Joanna to come on.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to also thank my subcommittee. They have jumped in and really given great insight and thought on transporting our most precious assets. Transportation scheduling will depend on the community's needs. Information from the reopening registration will assist in assigning students appropriately. We are planning on using the established bus routes based on the new bell time schedules. So the yellow and orange phases are similar in needs for proposed bus paraprofessionals at the elementary level, students needing to wear masks and adhere to seating assignments, loading students from the back of the bus to the front, and unloading from the front of the bus to the back on arrival. School staff availability at the buildings to assist at arrival and dismissal times, and the availability of disposable masks for students who may arrive without one to the stop. The one specific difference between the yellow and orange phases is the assigned capacity, which will shift from 80% to 50% if this district moves to a hybrid model. Students would then be scheduled on alternating days based on the proposed educational plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Sandra, for health
Yes.
and safety.
Okay, thank you guys. Again, I do really want to thank my subcommittee. I thank them often, but I really am grateful for the guidance that they provided us during this process of ensuring that we make our schools healthy and safe for our students and our staff. So again, the goal is to make sure that we are ensuring the well-being of all staff and students. And we did so by creating some protocols to reduce and prevent the spread of COVID. We included a set of behaviors that we want all staff members and from all staff and students from our community to learn and practice in order to maintain a safe and healthy environment. And we believe if we adhere to these, that we will maintain a healthy learning environment. And this is everything from social distancing to wearing masks to cohorting when feasible in the younger grades, enhancing cleaning processes and protocols, having a clear system for what to do if somebody does become sick. So reacting to possible exposures. And we've outlined these communication plans along with Brenda to make sure that they are unique to stakeholder groups and also specific to the age of the child. And in our planning, we took into account like how this impacts the instructional model and what sort of routines need to become embedded in the classroom that we have to teach our children, not just for their safety while at school, but also just for their personal safety as they navigate this world, given the pandemic. We followed the guidance from the state, the CDC, and then there was a lot of input from the health director, our medical advisor, the nurses, another doctor that was on our subcommittee, parents, and teachers. So I do feel that we have a robust plan. Robin Keller also gave us some help in looking at the language and making sure that we were taking into account all of our stakeholder groups. And we trust that we will be able to bring people back and have them safe no matter what phase we're in. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Specialized learning, Yvette, if you would.
Sorry about that. We had a robust committee of 28 that broke up into 4 work groups. I am very indebted to them for their thinking and their passion and their thoughtful work. We were guided by several principles. The first is that there has been no flexibility waivers provided for FAPE, the federal law governing special education services, and therefore implementation of IEP hours and addressing goals must be in place regardless of the level of risk that we find ourselves in. In order to address that, the district has placed a priority for daily in-person services for all students with disabilities whose parents opt into that model. Recognizing that students with disabilities are general education students first, as our colleagues were rolling out the curricular expectations, the educational planning, both in person and virtually, issues related to accommodations, collaboration, UDL were all part of the initial planning so that we're not thinking about how to modify our work, but rather all students, including students with disabilities, were part of the thinking initially as we roll out our plans. Families asked for us to provide for clear cohort groupings, ensuring parental preference for in-person or virtual services, and providing clear communication and consistent schedules. If we look at the work group design, we looked at 3 levels of students' needs. The first are students with mild needs who spend the great majority of their time in general education with 6 hours or less on their IEPs of specialized services. There are 1,400 students in that cohort. They will follow their general education cohorts, and we will schedule special education supports and services into the classrooms using engineered classroom settings. The next group of students are students with moderate needs who have more than 6 hours but less than special class recommendations on their IEPs. There are approximately 350 students in that cohort. Students in that area may participate in 2 cohorts in a hybrid model to allow for full-time services and full implementation of IEP hours. We will use engineered classrooms and hybrid service delivery models to provide related services. And finally, students with severe needs who spend 80% of their time in specialized learning centers. There are 140 of those students, half of whom are in approved private schools placed by the school district, will form their own cohorts, and again, related service models will follow a push-in model. All students across all conditions have devices and individual toolboxes ready to use at home or in school. I do want to speak just briefly about child find issues and then the mental health and SEL. We are currently doing in-person evaluations and will continue to do so. PPTs will continue to be done remotely to minimize in-person meetings. That has been going very well this summer. And finally, as Frank said, social emotional learning and mental health is at the forefront of all of our work for all of our children. The plan includes providing daily SEL supports to all students, accessing existing SEL school supports, providing tiered interventions for counseling, providing parent counseling and training and consultation with special attention to include bilingual supports, and increased contract and contact with our community-based agencies to provide trauma-informed care, including consultation to staff and adults about self-care and self-help prior to school reopening. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Dr. Katona, if you could come on and speak to the co-curricular portion.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Doug and I would also like to thank our committee, many of whom are on here, for their input and good thinking. The three driving forces for our extracurricular and after-school work was around the SEL, the preservation of programs, particularly at the middle to high school level, and childcare for before and after for our families. So in this plan, we looked at elementary, middle, high school, and the virtual school. And recommendations are that elementary will be providing before and after care with no other outside enrichments, focused on working with organizations that they have been partnering with, and will follow guidelines and safety protocols that will be approved by the district by Dr. Costanzo, and maintaining a steady staff, so we're not having a series of adults coming in and out of the buildings. They will follow our cohort protocols in the after school for that continuity. At the middle school level, it's the same idea, but there is an opportunity for a little bit of enrichment for the arts and sports and other clubs to be taught solely by teachers in that building, and continuing to maintain the cohorting that's set by the middle school. We're recommending no travel outside of the school, and continuing to have all our performances done virtually at this time. At the high school level, we'll continue to do all sports and clubs. We're asking that the schools not be rented out to any outside organizations. The public school, Norwalk Public Schools will follow the CIAC and FCIAC guidelines for all sports, and the bands will follow the US band guidelines. Our bands will stay cohorted, but in smaller, they'll meet as a band and stay cohorted in smaller groups by instruments. And our sports teams will escalate their safety protocols to keep our athletes safe. We are opening virtual school, offering opportunity for students in high school who attend virtual school to still participate in sports or band at their high school. And where we can, we will cohort those students together. Our middle and elementary schools will be offered separate after-school virtual opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Katona. Tom Hamilton, if you would come on and speak to the financial piece.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Costanzo. I too want to thank the members of the Finance Subcommittee who met multiple times and pulled together a lot of documentation and financial information in a short period of time. I should say that the template, the reopening template that was distributed by the state did not actually contain a financial section per se, but the state did require all school districts to complete a survey, which actually was filed last week. And included in that survey was information on projected costs of reopening. So we felt, given the fact that we've undertaken the work and have already filed that survey with the state, it made some sense to include a short section on financial considerations in this report. So that's what's in here. So in addition to providing the same high-level information that we provided the state last week in terms of the total costs, we've outlined here some of the constraints and some of the considerations that are part of the ambiguity and uncertainty that we currently face. So we pointed out that there's considerable additional costs associated with any of the reopening plans, regardless of the particular scenario. There are additional costs that will accrue or that the district will incur, and that at present these are really what we would term unfunded but anticipated reopening expenses. And the final amount is really evolving and is fluid because of the fact that the plan itself is evolving and fluid and is subject to further guidance that will be forthcoming from both the state as well as local authorities. We've indicated here there's also uncertainty with respect to the availability and pricing and delivery of various commodities and services that may need to be procured as part of this reopening, and that also needs to be acknowledged. And finally, from the standpoint of actually paying for this plan, that the district needs to work closely with our federal, state, and city partners to identify how the additional resources will be secured. We know that the federal government is currently considering a major coronavirus relief bill, and certainly a large focus of the discussions down in Washington right now revolve around the issue of additional costs that school districts will face as part of reopening schools. So we do expect that there will likely be additional grant funding coming, but the amount of funding and what the funding can be used for and the timing of that funding are all unknowns at this point. So in terms of bottom line, what we're projecting is about $21.6 million of additional expense in both personnel costs and non-personnel costs. And we've identified in the report a laundry list of the types of expenses from bus monitors who will be needed to make sure that students are continuing to wear masks, to some of the additional social and emotional support services that Yvette referenced in her report, to, of course, PPE for employees, as well as additional expenses for building cleaning and sanitizing services. So there's really a whole laundry list of additional areas of expense that we would anticipate. So that's pretty much summarizes our section, finance section.
Thank you, Tom. And I'll now ask for Javier Padilla to come on and speak to the talent and staffing component to this report.
Thank you, Dr. Costanzo. We have had the fortunate pleasure of working with a very dedicated and diverse team and really putting our thinking around our most important goal, which is bringing employees back to work and bringing them back to a work environment that's safe and secure. As you heard from Diane Filardo's data, we did engage in some work to understand how prepared are our employees to come back, and what are some of the preferences and support systems needed in order for them to come back to a safe and supportive environment. The data will be used as benchmark data so that we have an understanding of some of the programs and services that need to be instituted. We are very clear that our work will begin probably after the reopen plan is submitted, and once we have more definitive data around student enrollment, and we understand how many students will enroll in the virtual school, and hence how many students will be in in-class instruction. This will help us to understand how we best leverage and align our talent resources. Similar to students having the options on what instruction they prefer, ideally, we would like to create a system where we could match employees' preferences and instruction or work environment preferences. We will work very, very hard to take that into consideration. But of course, all of that is predicated by ensuring that staff has the appropriate experience and qualifications, certifications to do the work that they are interested in doing. And very importantly, we have to also ensure that contractually, we're allowed to have people do the work that they prefer based on either MOUs that we have to draft and approve, or things like seniority and other factors that we have to take into consideration. The other piece of this committee that we have been working very closely on is trying to understand what contingency workforces we may need, and ensuring that those workforces have the appropriate training and protocols to come into the school environment. In particular, we are trying to ensure that we have a robust pool of substitutes in the event they're needed, as well as other support and ancillary staff, such as additional paras, bus monitors, and other talent that has been referenced earlier. In addition to having the people in the right places at the right time, we want to ensure that we're thinking about social and emotional support for our students, but also for our employees. We are looking for ways to leverage our EAP partners and try to come up with plans to engage in whether they're email campaigns or other sort of campaigns to promote healthy habits, mind and body well-being, and self-care. Because if we want our students to be successful, we understand that our employees need to be successful. This also means that we have to be very, very clear on any legal and regulatory rights and benefits that are available to our employees. So we have committed and are working on ensuring that we have clearly documented and accessible policies and procedures, so that when employees need information around leaves, accommodations, or any other rights, that they're accessible. Finally, just want to share that we've spent a lot of time also talking about professional development and training that will be required in order for our employees to be successful. There's a lot of training around technology, systems integrations, different applications, their needs, and not just having them accessible, but ensuring that all employees know how to use the technology. And so we were very, very clear that when we're talking about professional development, we're also including para-educators and other support staff. We have to do that at the district level because there are a lot of training needs in different areas of the district, and so we have to coordinate that. One that has come up that we have to pay attention and take into consideration, in particular for certified staff, is around guidance and protocols for evaluations during this environment, and what are the appropriate standards? How do we help evaluators and evaluatees on how to collect data for formative data for evaluations, as well as how to analyze standard and non-standard data. And so as we're thinking about performance for the next coming year, independent of whether or not the state waives formal evaluations, is important for us to think about how we incorporate that into our system and into our processes. So those are the high-level areas of focus of work for us, and we will continue to work once the reopen plan is submitted.
Thank you very much, Javier, and thank you to the leads of the various subcommittees for these substantive and thorough reviews. We'll now ask if anyone on the task force has any specific questions related to any portions of this report or anything else that we have covered so far during this meeting.
I have a question, and this question is for Ralph. Ralph, will the teachers use Zoom for the entire class time?
So are you talking about in the virtual school model?
Yes.
Really, we want to be able to have as much live instruction as possible. So yeah, I mean, they really need to be connected with their students.
Okay, so that means they're going to get more training, because I noticed last year that they didn't do that much Zoom and they didn't have that interaction with the teachers. And I would like to see more interaction with the teachers and we're going to do hybrid. We're not going back to school. And I would like to see more interaction with the teachers.
Yeah, we will be doing more training specifically around our video conferencing tools, not only for the virtual school, but for all teachers too. Yes, understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brenda, do you have any other questions?
No, I just thought that, well, it's not a question, it's a statement. At the beginning, when we first went into this, I thought they did a wonderful job over at Nathan Hill. They did, I felt like they did. And then as time went on, it just started to get, you know, I don't think people understood what was going on. And I didn't think that the teachers had enough training for Zoom. But in terms of keeping in touch with the students, they did. But I thought that they needed to have more interactions with this teacher. But I gotta say, Nathan Hill was right on. They did a great job. I thought they did so.
Well, thank you for those comments, and I think your thoughts are shared widely among the community. You know, as a first go round, we did the best we could, but certainly could be doing better should we need to go into that distance learning model again. The goal would be for teachers and students to be operating in a synchronous way. So it is as if that they're in the classroom together for the duration. Are there other questions that others may have?
Frank here, this is Ileana Zuniga. Just a quick question. Will they be sharing any of the survey results with the parents in the meetings that are set up with Dr. Estrella?
I can definitely do that. So I'll make sure that we incorporate that.
Thank you.
This is Robin Keller. I have a question, if I might. And if this has been addressed, forgive me, as I'm new to the task force. So I'm not sure if it's for Brenda Williams or for Ralph, but when we're communicating with the parents and you're looking to see which model that they are most interested in at the moment, I would suggest that you also take into consideration what I'm hearing from a lot of the parents that I communicate with, which is their uncertainty if they can opt in at a later date. There's a lot of, I think I want to start my kid at distance, but if it seems like it's going well, then like 6 weeks in, will I be able to call up the school and say, okay, I want my kid to start tomorrow? Would there be, you would think, a 2-week delay? Well, wait a minute, we have to see how your child can fit in, or won't that be allowed at all? And I think that being communicated from the start will be very important. And I understand the tension because you don't want to encourage that per se, but just wanted to let you know that a lot of the parents that are considering distance learning and are frightened because of compromised family members, et cetera, you know, at home or the child themselves, that is something that they are very concerned about. The other thing, and Tom Hamilton, this is for you, that I'm hearing is that, oh, and by the way, just going back to that point, there are some districts that are saying, if you go for virtual learning from the start, then you cannot come back to school. And I won't get into all that, that's actually.
Okay, Robin, can we first focus on the first statement that you made?
Sure.
Before you move into the finance component. So the state has been very clear that the parents have the right to opt in and out whenever they deem fit. So as we're thinking through the plan, one of the things that we're really focusing on is making sure that if a parent chooses to change their mind for whatever reason they might have, that we're prepared to accommodate the child immediately. So the communication that we're going to bring out to our parent community, and I think what we've been discussing amongst the task force, is that parents at the end of the day will have the ultimate right to decide. And our responsibility is going to be to provide those options when they're ready to make that transition. So if a parent comes to us, hypothetically speaking, tomorrow and says that they want to come back to live instruction, then we have to immediately accommodate that child. If that child wishes to go into remote, then we have to afford those opportunities. And I know, Brenda, if you want to elaborate a little bit more, but I know Brenda has been thinking about in terms of how we set up the cohorts and engaging in that conversation. Because it's going to be really important that as we're engaging in the design, that we're building the structures to allow parents to have that flexibility, but not have a delay in doing that switching. I don't know, Brenda, if you have anything else to add.
Just to add to that a little bit, it's one of the things we were talking about. So if I'm a 6th grade student, we want to make sure you're in a complete virtual environment. Your course schedule, the way your schedule is developed, the blocks, how you're taking virtual school will transition you easily into a middle school environment. So the more continuity we have, and there's 2 purposes of this. One is for students who are moving from virtual to a face-to-face or hybrid model, but it also is in case there is more COVID in the environment and all students go remote and then have to move quickly back into classrooms. We need that flexibility in our current structure. If you're the parent of a 6th grader, you will be identified in a house. You'll have a 6th grade team for your cohort, and you will be labeled either group 1 or 2. You might start school every day, but if we had to go to hybrid, you would know that group 1 goes on certain days in group 2, and we build that in the schedule for the curriculum and in the daily design so that we can move in these environments.
And Robin, just from the other Brenda here, I hear your point about the communication and I appreciate that. So made a note on that and we'll make sure that we're clear on those options. So.
And Brenda, Brenda Williams, we can also add that to the town hall piece when we.
Absolutely, because it will reduce parent anxiety if they understand those options more clearly, so.
And I know, Robin, you had a second portion to your question.
Thank you. Yeah, Brenda Williams, that will be huge. You know, I mean, that is the #1 discussion, you know, that I'm hearing. And then also Brenda Myers, I think that, again, the publicity part about how you and Ralph, and we're talking about seamless integration as the goal between in school and being educated at home. I mean, that's just downright impressive, you know, and you get that word out, that'll be great. The second question I had, and Tom, I think this, and again, these are the discussions that come up where so many districts are saying, gosh, there's no way that we can ever, you know, have kids in 5 days a week because of the financial constraints. And I think one question that you want to be prepared to answer if it comes up is, if you were written a check tomorrow for $22 million, boom, you got it. Forget about where the source comes and everything else. how long would it take to actually be able to open up for 5-day learning for the whole school district? I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm saying that's sort of, you know, we always talk about it'll be enormous cost. We don't know where it's going to come from. Let's say tomorrow you get the money. How does the district respond? You know, and that, is there a plan on how to go to the full day model with the increased funding?
Well, I'll let others speak, but it's my understanding that we are intending to go open up with full 5-day instruction in building, in-person instruction from day one is really the imperative that the State Department of Education has laid out. So it's my understanding that's how we're expecting to open up. Now, the issue of the funding of how the you know, how do we pay for that, that's a harder question to answer. And I think you do raise an issue of you know, if we need items to do this successfully, and sourcing all of this material and all of these items is going to be a challenge, and we're working on it now. But you know, you've got school districts all around the country looking for, you know,
oh yeah,
plexiglass shields and partitions and, you know, many other things. So you know, I'm not going to say that's not going to be a challenge. It probably will be a challenge.
Thank you.
I have a lot of questions. I think a lot of people probably have these same questions, and I won't go through all of them. But one of my questions is, we're talking about if we have to go into a hybrid model. What does that look like? And forgive me if this was talked about already, but I'm trying to take notes and hear everything. What does it look like in terms of how many days per week if we go hybrid?
If we go hybrid, we would be in what we call the orange plan, and students would be assigned a code of either A, B, or C. And if we were to take a look at, say, a 2-week period of time, in week 1, the A students would go to a building in person Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And on Thursday and Friday, those A-coded students would receive remote learning. The B students in that same week would experience remote learning Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and they would receive in-person instruction inside a building on Thursday and Friday. A C-coded student would have signed up for virtual learning throughout the process, at least until they make a change otherwise. And so they would be receiving remote instruction. If you were to go to the next week in that particular calendar, in order to create an equal number of in-person days, in the second week, the B students would move to in-person 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then they would be remote on Thursday and Friday. And the A students in that second week would then be in-person 2 days. So they would basically rotate, flip on and off. So 50% of our population would be in-person 3 days a week, 2 days remote, and then it flips so that A and B have an equal number of in-person and remote days.
Frank, will you mind sharing the sketch diagram that the team started? I think that will be helpful for people to visualize.
Sure. Yeah, and also, is that the same for elementary, middle, and high school? The same?
Yes, it is.
It's the same for elementary through middle school. Here's the question about high school. So high school has always been block scheduled A-B days. Right. And so basically a student would get 4 blocks on A day, 4 blocks on B day. That would be their 8 courses that they would have in a high school program. So they really are more of an A-B because of that split schedule. Scott might want to address that just a little bit. K through 8 would be on the same A-B schedule.
So on a hybrid, then we're expecting that parents K through 8 will be able to handle their kid being in school 3 days and then out of school 2 days and rotating like that?
So this is the example that we've been referring to. So if you take a look, you'll see that in August and September, we would start on the first day of school, which would be August 31st. The A days would be available or would be in person Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And the B students would be in person on Thursday and Friday. So we've just, this is just a draft, but this would be an in-person schedule. If you look at the second week, you would see that those cohorts rotate. So the B students would be assigned Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in person, and the A students would be assigned in person Thursday and Friday. And so it just kind of flips back and forth. Over the course of the year, this will work out in a way where each cohort receives the same number of in-person hours.
I think Ms. Anderson, Doreen,
Doreen, yeah.
Your first name, right?
Yes, Doreen, yes.
Doreen, the point that you brought up is this going to be the same for elementary. One of the things that we've been having conversations about is if parents choose for their children to be engaged in live instruction at the elementary school level, we're hoping that we can reduce the population density enough at the middle and high school level to have all elementary school children come 5 days a week. Because we know for pre-K as well as some of the early childhood grades, it's very difficult to engage in the flip-flopping of time, and also in keeping in consideration to the needs of parents that are in the field working. It becomes very problematic for them to find childcare in a rotating basis. So part of the thinking that we're trying to do is, especially for elementary school children with special needs that do not benefit from inconsistent scheduling and shifts of that nature, we're really looking to organize the program where they would be in school 5 days a week, even in a 50-50 model. So
that does answer a question, because I know that would be a hard schedule for many working parents to, I need childcare on these 3 days, and then, you tell your boss I need childcare the next week on these days. I don't see that as being, workable. My other question then is, when we're in the yellow, which seems to be how we're starting off, if a child is distance learning from the beginning, who actually is teaching that student in elementary, middle, and high school? So for instance, someone decides to keep their child home to distance learn at the beginning. Are they still part of the school and the classroom, and who is actually doing the teaching? Is it the same person that they would have if they were actually in the building? How is that going to work?
They'll be at the younger grade levels, it'll be registered to a specific teacher. So depending on the amount of students district-wide. But that being said, they'll still also be registered to the school. One of the things that we're doing on the back end is making sure that that connection to their actual building is still going to be there. So if you're a third grader, we may need to have one teacher teaching virtually students from 4 or 5 different schools. Those kids will still get all the communications and everything from their principal as well from those actual schools. So Power School will still work so that if there's a blast that goes out, they'll actually get the information on what's going on in that school as well. Does that kind of answer your question?
I guess I'm still a little confused. So if someone is in, let's say, 6th or 7th grade and they're distance learning, is it going to be a teacher that's home distance teaching that's going to be teaching them? Or
well, we don't know if they'll be home, if they'll be in a remote area, but
in a remote area, okay.
That's dedicated to distance learning, yes.
Okay, but they won't necessarily be from the child's actual school that they would be attending if they were in class?
Yeah.
So let me just clarify. So
yeah.
you're talking about, Doreen, about the AAABB schedule. In that situation, which is mainly going to be probably upper, middle, and high school, or if, depending on what Brenda articulated, we might have to do an A-B schedule. It's going to, the way that we're potentially looking at the model is in a synchronous way, so that kids don't lose out in instruction the days that they're home versus the days that they're in person, and that there's continuity in that learning. So we're thinking of them being via Zoom in the same environment with the rest of the peers that are engaging in learning, in live instruction for that day. And I know
Okay,
that, go ahead.
All right, so you're still talking about the hybrid. So in the hybrid, if there's the A students home and the B students are in class, it's the same teacher doing both? Okay, I was actually moving to the yellow. If we're in yellow and a parent decides to keep their student home on distance learning, who is that? Okay, again, it's like a sixth grade.
Yeah, it will be. So let's say it's a third grade, the third grade student is going to have a teacher, just like they were in their school. They will actually have a full-time certified district teacher. But that teacher,
but not necessarily in their school that they would, if someone goes to Rowayton, but they choose to have their child stay home.
It may not, it depends how we work out. They will, if they decide to transition back, they'll transition back to Rowayton, back into that same environment. But it would be almost like switching teachers in a different grade level if they did that. So there will be teachers dedicated to the virtual learning environment.
Okay, and then, so potentially these kids could be with kids that they don't know, they've never seen before, and they're just going to make that into a classroom. And then does that work the same then? How does that work logistically for high school, if a high school student is home? We're going to have enough teachers to cover all the different subjects that are in high school?
So the high school piece is what we're really working out right now. And remember, the caveat that I put into when we talked about the virtual learning is that depending on courses, depending on everything else, we will offer to the capacity of the school, to the virtual learning school, what's available. There may be some little outlier courses that we really need to kind of look into when those students enroll. So I use culinary as an example, and that may not be the best example, that it may not be able to be one of those courses, but for the most part, all our core courses, all the AP, any courses that students would normally take, we will have an option for them to be able to take that in that environment. It's a little more problematic at the.
Am I to understand? My kids go to Nathan Hill. They're doing virtual learning. They will be in a class with somebody from Roden opponents. Is that what you're saying?
It could be. I mean,
okay, that's all I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if it works out that we have enough students from Nathan Hill, we would ideally put a teacher there that would work with those Nathan Hill students. But it's not gonna be that clean at any one point. So we will have to have kids that are commingled from different schools, but it'll be that grade level. Yeah.
If I may, there are some highly specialized services that would serve kids well to strategically group across the district in the virtual model. So for example, this summer we are providing very high level services to kids with dyslexia by highly trained staff. They've functionally grouped in very tight clusters of kids from across the district, and that has served the kids really well. So in some instances, pulling from across the district on those narrow, highly specialized courses is the best model to deliver the highest impact of service.
Yeah, but to reiterate that.
Yvette. Sorry,
Yeah, we're going to do our best to actually make sure that if students were in Rowayton, that those students in Rowayton are together in a class. But they may not constitute the whole, there may be more than that in that class.
I think that's important, like social emotionally. I mean, if you've got a kid that knows nobody and there's no connection to this, I think we need to try to keep some kind of connection for these kids for their school.
No, that's a given. That we want to make sure we kind of keep them, but it may not be just kids from that school. We're going to try and group them because you may not have a full class from the teacher from that one.
Right, understood.
So sorry, just to Just to add on to what Yvette just said, in terms of specialty classes, would that also include honors classes for high school students? Or AP, I don't know what the denomination is when the kids are getting transitioned into honors courses. How would that apply if they decide to go into a fully virtual environment?
We would have an AP teacher teaching those courses for that.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
So David Huvelman here. So I'm understanding this correctly. The virtual school is a separate staffed entity. Is that what we're saying? So you're going to pull the virtual school from the district as a whole, but if a child opts to go back into in person, then that child will go back into their homeroom, for want of a better phrase. Is that how I'm understanding this?
Back to their home school, yes.
Home school. So then at that point, if you would go into an orange 50-50 density, does the virtual school just stay that way? The virtual school holds its own through all 3 levels if you choose the virtual school.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. That was just
continuity, yes.
Now, I have another question that has come up. How is there a metric yet from the state that is identifying when we go yellow, orange, and red? Who makes that call? At what point do we start sending out the warnings that we're about to make that call? Is there anything yet published to tell us what those choices are, or is that something that we are left to our own devices to figure out based on activity within our own?
So that's a local decision that would be made with the Department of Health here in collaboration with the district office, based on incident rate and patterns. They have not provided the metrics that you are articulating because those metrics will look different depending on the different municipalities. But I can further engage that question at the state level if they have some parameter that they're expecting us to follow. The only guidance that we have is that we would make that decision in collaboration with the Department of Health.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question about, this is to drop back into the virtual model and the teaching. In the 50-50 situation where we go into orange and we're in the split density, the AABB model, the teacher will be then teaching synchronously to the remote kids and the kids in class at the same time, correct?
Correct.
How is that going to be achieved? What technology is being put in place to achieve?
So part of the work that Tom and I and the rest of the team engaged in looking at how much funding we would need. One of the things that even with Ralph, we had the conversation was making sure that the laptops that teachers had were well equipped with cameras. As an initial proposition, Yvette has been having conversations with the team around getting swivel cameras as another alternative. Everything depends on cost. At a minimum, we are making sure that all teachers have adequate laptop devices with built-in cameras to support that work.
If I just add on to the superintendent's comments, this really goes back to Brenda's earlier comment and desire for teachers to have regular and real engagement with kids if we're in a distance environment. And so having a synchronous schedule throughout the day for a student who's home is really important to us. And the superintendent has collaborated with other area superintendents. And so we're not operating in a vacuum here. There's definitely a desire across our area to have this be the sort of the new norm, where a teacher would be working with a group of remote students and a group of students face to face. And we realize that this is new and different, and we want to be able to provide the supports to our teachers so that we can do this effectively. But I believe that our common objective here is to engage students as best as possible when they're not in the room with us.
And how will we be, monitoring or supervising the remote learners at that point? Will there be paraprofessionals that will also be a part of this? Will there be additional staff? Are we relying on just parental involvement at this point? And these are all, huge questions that come up within the community. The other huge question that comes to my mind goes back to what Robin was driving at earlier about budget and cost. With, if you had the $22 million, it makes sense. If you don't have the $22 million, where do we achieve this at this point? Or where do we not spend money to achieve this, to make sure that we are giving everyone, the full quality education?
Well, if you're following the national political conversation right now, the House and the Senate are debating the contents of the next Coronavirus Relief Act. And, the Connecticut state's budget is operating at a projected deficit for next year. So if we're going to get any of this $22 million, it'll be embedded in the federal legislation that's being worked out right now in Congress. Whether or not we get all of the 22 million, some of the 22 million, I think we'll have a better idea at some point. Congress goes out of session. I think they're out of session in August. So the goal would be to have a pretty good idea about whether or not we'd be getting any federal assistance by the end of this month. And then, we can sort of plan from there if it's less than 22 million.
Hey, Frank, let me add that our subcommittee actually discussed this issue today and decided our next work for our subcommittee is to really kind of weed through our list of items and categorize them into items that are essential for us to procure ASAP in order to open, as opposed to items that are on this list that perhaps would fall into a category of expense that we would only initiate and incur if funding is available. So for instance, although absolutely, really important that we provide the social and emotional supports that Yvette Gorovich has outlined, the fact of the matter is we're not going to be in a position to hire additional social workers and those kinds of things until we have, a funding source that is definitely available to pay for it. On the other hand, some of the things now, PPE, and I had a chat, a message from Robin relative to PPE. It's my understanding from some of the earlier discussions that the district has already procured some of the PPE to kind of get us going, if you will, for the start of school. But certainly PPE is going to be, something that we have to have available no matter what. So what we're going to look to do is to identify within our existing operating budget what would be the first things that we would reprioritize and say, okay, we're going to put these other expenses on hold so that we can undertake issue purchase orders and procure those items that are most essential to the first day of opening. And then we'll have to say some of these other needs are going to have to wait until we understand how much federal funding may be available and whether or not there's any other funding from any other sources that could help us.
Thanks. I think that the biggest concern that I'm in a lot of places is, what is this going to look like? And until you know the answers to those questions, we don't actually 100% know what this will look like. So therefore, it's hard for parent decisions right now. And I think that's sort of where I'm driving at.
There's a lot of uncertainty all around for everyone in this. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. No question that there is.
Hey, Tom, have you spoke to anybody on the city side about if we don't get any funds from the feds, like what kind of monies we'll get from the rainy day fund?
I've not had any of those discussions. I did indicate, or we've indicated, our committee indicated in our report that we need to, work closely with our federal, state, and city partners, and absolutely that needs to be, a discussion that happens.
Can we go back to the talent office? I have a question. It seemed to be suggesting that we're creating our own evaluation rubrics or standards here in Norwalk, but we have a state legislated evaluation system with vetted like scientific rubrics. I'm very uncomfortable to think that we're going to create a system of evaluation here. I'm aware that we need evaluation and support, which is what the system should be. And I have, we're standing by to get the PDEC, the Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, back in order to do that. But that I would not want to hear that this is going to be, rolled out at the beginning of school.
Mary, just to be clear, we're not creating a new performance evaluation system. We need to get guidance from the state on whether or not there will be a waiver, or if we in fact will be evaluating formally. But even absent that, there just needs to be calibration around how people provide feedback, how people evaluate, what are the appropriate protocols under this new environment that's new to everyone. So we're not creating a system. We need to understand how to use the system and what are the modifications that need to be made depending on the guidance that we get from the state.
Okay, thank you. Also, because a related question, professional development and support, there was a lot of discussion just now about the various needs for professional learning. I reject that this is the new normal, teaching 2 classes at the same time and juggling back and forth, but I do accept the responsibility on the part of all teachers to understand how to do the best we can do in whatever model is proposed to teach. So we are working hard to figure out how to teach our kids in all of these different various environments that are being proposed. I don't hear that there is extra time or attention or time being placed to providing that professional development. In many of the other plans, there were early dismissal days, there was time set aside at the beginning of the school year. I'm not hearing that that's part of this plan, and it was something that was lacking in the spring as we continued to increase the complexity and rigor of our assignments, but we did not keep up with the professional learning to do so. Brenda Penn-Williams just pointed out that there were some problems there. What she experienced, we felt some difficulties as well in producing what we need to produce. So we're looking forward to seeing what kind of learning is provided.
So Mary, in terms of the professional development, once we articulate what the plan, the final plan will look like, then we can better discuss and identify what the professional learning needs are. I know the state made some adaptation around the 180 days to 177 days. I don't think that is wise to front load those 3 days at the beginning of the year, but we could definitely have conversations about how to break that over time to build professional learning for the personnel in the district. And we can further discuss about other opportunities as well.
Thank you.
But I think we need to ensure we have a model first that we can then design professional learning around.
That was my concern, that the model doesn't incorporate the way other districts do, but we can talk later. Thank you.
We'll talk later.
Dr. Estrella, I did just have one question. If you could just elaborate a little bit more on the idea that in it sounds like kind of a best case or a good scenario might be the ability to offer for elementary school students to come in 5 days a week. It sounds to me that that would be contingent on space availability based on what happens in the high schools. Is that correct?
So the idea would be that in that situation, the middle and high school kids would engage in a hybrid model of live and digital learning, so that it allows us to have enough space to reduce the student ratio across the district to allow us to have elementary school students here every single day, 5 days a week. That will mean that some classes would have to expand into other buildings. So it will create that dynamic that principals might be in more than one building to accommodate their population size. But the goal will be to ensure that elementary school students will all have the opportunity to be here 5 days a week if the parents choose to. The other caveat to that is, given the survey results, already we have a significant number of students that are choosing, parents that are choosing to learn remotely. So that in itself will reduce the student ratio significantly, to the point that even if we were at the 50-50 model, we might not have to relocate certain classes because enough students will be have opted into the remote option as an alternative. The challenge will be when parents start feeling comfortable in sending the students back to school, and how like we manage population density at that point. That might create a situation that we will have to use other facilities to accommodate.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just a follow-up question, 2 follow-up questions I have on that would just be then, if you could expand a little bit on how it, because if we were to do that, that would mean we would have to hire additional teachers because we would be splitting classrooms, or would that be facilitated by para-educators?
So in the synchronous model, we wouldn't need to hire additional teachers. They would just be spread throughout the district in terms of the actual space available to keep the ratios low.
And then my final question is just back in what you just shared. So if a family opted for virtual, but then after that found out that now, I would imagine a lot will opt for that because of the A-B schedule is very difficult. So I'm just wondering if then that would create a situation if then they opted out, which created space and allowed us for 5 days a week, would those families then want to immediately opt back in because now school is 5 days a week?
They have the right, we have to accommodate.
Thank you.
I just want to be respectful of time. We're 7 minutes past the allotted time that we set aside for everyone. I just want to take a moment just to highlight one last thing. I don't know, can I share am I able to share, Ralph, even though, let me try. Yeah, I can. So Ralph and Brenda Williams have worked with their teams, as well as all of the leads, to create a podcast to provide some updates for the community at large around the work that has been started and what has been done, in an effort to keep parents and community informed. So this is, can you see it? Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to show you a little snippet of it. This is the podcast that has been created, and that will be shared, if it hasn't been shared already, to the community at large.
It's already out on social media.
Hello.
Okay.
I am Dr. Alexandra Estrella, Superintendent
I'm just
of
going to fast forward it a little bit.
Norwalk. Daily social and emotional supports for all students, while increasing our community-based supports to provide consultation.
Going. We need to work together and in the moment with the health and safety of our students, staff, parents, officials, and support.
Arrival at school administrators and staff will be on
with partners such as families, educators, and staff. Hearing from families and staff is critical to the task force, so an immediate action.
The Talent and Staffing Subcommittee
So I just wanted to show you just a little bit of it so that you get the sense, but you'll have an opportunity to take a look at the podcast. It's a way for us to start bridging the communication gap between what we're doing and the things that are happening as a result of the work that we're doing with the community. So Brenda, you just said that it's already out.
It's out on social media, and it's in progress via e-blast on School Messenger to all families, and up on our YouTube channel, and it'll be linked to via our website as well. So
Yeah,
both English and Spanish versions.
In the chat, if everybody looks, I put the English and Spanish direct links to the YouTube channels. It's already posted.
I would like to see you guys do Creole. Okay, please do Creole. I would like to see you guys do Creole. I have a lot of Haitian people that come to the NAACP, and they feel like they're excluded. So I would like for you to also do Creole. Thank you.
That's one of the things we're working on. A lot of the written communication has been in Spanish as well as Creole. We're trying this one step at a time, because the amount of time that it requires to engage in the translation process, we learned a lot from this last podcast that will inform how we continue to do it moving forward. But I just want you to be aware that all the written communication has been translated in both languages. This is the first time we engage in a podcast. As we continue to get better at this piece, we will make sure that we include it as in Creole as well.
Yeah. And we did, Brenda, just the press release that went out on the equity initiative, just so that you know, that went out to families. We have 220 students, I think, who identify as Haitian Creole as their primary language. That was translated and went out to them in Haitian Creole. So we are working on expanding our capabilities, as Dr. Esmay said.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want you to know they feel left out. Some people, they don't understand. So I'm just trying to be a voice for them.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We're trying to build those metrics. So
that's not gonna work because I'm 37.
Yeah, and you can also get the translation of the closed captions on YouTube if you choose Haitian Creole. So that's something that you may want to communicate to your families, because they can actually just go to YouTube and change that automatically.
Yes, and we did that with the Spanish piece for the exception of mine, because I was able to just do it in Spanish. But I really appreciate that feedback. That's something we're really working on. I just wanted to thank everybody for all the questions and concerns that were brought up. I think that all the feedback and questions that were highlighted today will continue to inform the work that we do moving forward. Obviously, as you can tell, although we're submitting the document on Friday, we still have a lot of pieces that we need to further engage you and the community at large around. So this work is ongoing. I'm going to be sending calendar invites for the upcoming Wednesdays. So, and I'm hoping that the subcommittees continue to engage in the work the way that you have thus far, because I feel a lot of great work has happened as a result of that, but yet there's still a lot of work to be done. So again, thank you for your partnership in this work, and to be continued, because there's still a lot to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.